Hello, fellow adventurers. I'm Jake Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the summary of Session 5 from the Elenia Toth campaign of D&D that I've been hosting in my backyard since August 2022. This session, Session 5, was recorded October 2nd, 2022. Now stay with us through these summaries and the audio recordings because the first session with video is in February of 2023 and it's good. So stay tuned, follow the story, like and subscribe. Hallelujah, holy shit.
So you recall what happened last time at the end of they went to this I feel like I don't know if I told you. I feel like I told you though.
We did
They were
these recordings last week.
Yeah, they were trying to get the prince out of the Children's Rebellion camp. And I remember I told you that Una was about to get discovered, and then she used the globe and she turned invisible. And then she was trying to talk to the prince, but the prince was all freaked out that an invisible voice was talking to him, and everybody got in this big melee, and they got all overrun by guards who were trying to net them and knock them out with the butt of a scimitar, and they get dragged into this tent, and with Fia, the woman who's in charge of the Children's Rebellion, and they had to make a choice. And I couldn't plan anything until they made this choice, because Fia thinks that they should make a frontal assault on the castle of the queen and take the queen out by force. The prince feels like they should pretend that they are returning with the prince and saved him from kidnapping, but infiltrate from the inside, figure out what the mother is doing, and replace her from the inside without causing an international scandal. While Valentis, the prince's tutor, he thinks that the smartest move is to go to Parvus, join up with the army of the fallen, the woman who didn't win the battle of the War of Succession, join up with that army and bring the army back with them so that they have more power. Well, the party ended up deciding to bring the prince back to the queen and pretend that he had been, that they rescued him, and not tell him, well, they didn't decide that just yet, but they decided to sort of infiltrate from the inside, bring the prince back, pretend they rescued him, even though the prince had run away by himself because he was afraid of his mother. So they woke up in the Children's Rebellion camp, and Fia, the rebellion leader, didn't want them to leave, but Finn convinced her and said, if we install me in power, then I can bring you in, and we can talk about abolishing the rite of passage duels like you want, and maybe we can even raise your family to be a noble house. And Fia is like the leader of the communists, and she wants to abolish nobles and royalty, but she seems a little tempted by this idea. But she's basically like, go ahead, go back and do this, but if you don't make any progress within a couple months, we're going to come assault the castle, and I won't have any mercy on you. And Finn is like, I don't appreciate threats, but we'll work with you favorably. So the party leaves, and when they're outside of the children's camp, heading south towards the city, when they get outside the camp, they're approached by this very dirty halfling druid. He's like one of our unhoused neighbors. And he is not very charismatic, kind of unable to talk clearly, and he basically tells them that he had joined up with the Children's Rebellion because he thought that they were going to bring good, but he learned that this woman just wanted to put herself in power. So he heard that what they were doing was actually more good, and so he wants to join them in doing good and helping people, because that was his goal. So they're like, okay, fine. So they start walking together, and they walk for hours and hours, like a full day's march from the place back to the place. And as they're walking, they're all talking about, okay, what is our plan? What are we going to tell the queen? Da 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 da. And they decide that. So they're walking through the woods, and as they walk, they're deciding what they're going to tell the queen. And they decide not to tell her that it was about the Children's Rebellion, and somebody suggests blaming it on this foreign country, and then they decide not to do that, not to blame it on Liebenstag because it might cause an international event. And the prince comes up with this idea of blaming it on this monster that no one's ever heard of, and everybody shoots down that idea. And so they decide that the prince was kidnapped, to say that the prince was kidnapped by bandits who they fought to the death, killed them all, and they had no markings on them saying where they came from, so they have no more information except that a band of bandits stole the prince and that they brought them back. So that's what their plan is. So they're talking about this as they're walking through the woods. They get through the woods, they walk through the farmland. When they get to the edge of the farmland, they see a lot of burnt buildings from the riot that Una caused when she threw money into the crowd and did a Joker thing.
I remember that.
And so they, like, a bunch of barns and farms and stuff are all burned down from the riot that Una caused. And they keep walking, and they get to this sort of more desolate area that's all farm fields. And as they're walking, 2 scarecrows spring to life on either side of them, and 3 mud puddles spring to life, and all of these things are attacking them. And they're surprised by the scarecrows and the mud mephits, and both scarecrows do this horrifying scream. Ah! The big pit opens up for its mouth, and its eyes are gaping holes, and it just and a few of the party members become frightened, and one of the party members becomes paralyzed. So the party members fight these things, and I didn't predict. Tim chose the correct element of chromatic orb to throw at the scarecrow. He threw a fire orb. I predicted that he would pick like lightning or something. He chose a fire orb, and he shot it at the scarecrow, and fire does double damage to scarecrows. And Tim was like,
is it because they're made of
straw?
Yeah.
Tim was like, I was like, did you read this somewhere? Do you know? And Tim is like, no, I just figure scarecrows are made of straw, so fire's probably good. And it turns out they're vulnerable to fire, and they take double damage. And one of them had been hit by somebody else, and then he shot a fireball at this chromatic orb at it, and it just burst into flame and disappeared. It's like all on fire, and then like just burning and stuff. So pretty soon after that, I had another scarecrow animate from the field and attack them. And meanwhile, the mud mephits are vomiting a cone of mud filled with rocks all over them, and various player characters are getting restrained by the mud and frightened by the screams of the scarecrows. The scarecrows are attacking people with claws. At one point, about the middle of the battle, our new player character, David, his character Jasper, the tabaxi actor, is like walking down this lane, and he sees this thing going on, and he joins in. And our wizard, Tim, Lord Hans, happens to be incapacitated at the time, having been attacked by both a scarecrow and a mud mephit. And so the tabaxi bard stabs someone and casts healing word on Lord Hans, who like comes up back to life from off the ground. And so the tabaxi starts helping people by participating, and pretty soon they've dispatched all the monsters. I wanted it to be a little harder. I wanted everybody to be a little bit closer to death, but there was kind of a tension in the mud mephits attacking the prince, because the prince like seemed to be in danger, and the prince was paralyzed, and the prince was restrained by mud and stuff, and so there was like a feeling of like we need to protect the prince. Also, when I was planning this and I was playing Michael's character, I had him casting spells, but he didn't cast spells. He just turned into a bear. He turned into a bear and started fighting the scarecrows as a bear, which was pretty baller and tough. Pretty soon they had killed all of the creatures except for one. And when I got to that mud mephit's turn, I was like, the mud mephit looks around, and then it just turns into a mud puddle and drips away. Because it was like, obviously I'm going to lose. All my compatriots are dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, then everybody sits around and talks to each other and like gets to know this Tabaxi, who introduces himself and says that he's an actor at the theater sometimes and stuff. And Lord Hans actually remembers the bard from acting in the chorus of Hendrik the Fifth by Willem of Avon. Which is where the theater, the Muse of Fire Theater, got its name.
Okay.
Yes, Hendrik the Fifth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Tabaxi bard is just like, I was on the way to to pick up some medicine for my mother or something, and they decide to travel together. They go back to the city. I tell Lord Hans to roll insight, and Lord Hans realizes that the Tabaxi bard is the best talker of them all. So if they're planning to lie to the queen, they should use the Tabaxi bard's skills in that regard, because he's the best bullshitter of the whole group. As they approach the city, the queen has already heard of their success and has sent guards out to like thank them, and there's like a big huzzah, and people are like pounding things like, yeah, you're heroes, and the team is like, how the hell did these people know that we were coming back? And they're also, none of these people have ever seen monsters like the Scarecrow or the Mud Mephits, and like one of them does a Arcana check and discovers that it was probably animated by someone's magic. So they get to the city, everyone's happy to see them, the guard's like, the queen wants to bring you directly to the throne room. So they go to the throne room, and then a really motley interaction ensues as they attempt to lie to the queen, and the queen is like pointing out the ones among them who can't really speak well, and is like, tell me did this really happen, what this other person says? And she's like, somebody who's really good at persuasion tells this whole story, and then the queen asks somebody who's not really good at persuasion, like, is this the truth, yes or no? And so Una kind of fucks it up. She's, the queen's like, Una, is this true? And Una's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, roll persuasion, and she rolls a 1. And then the queen is like, very suspicious. She starts to get suspicious, but then somebody else who's got a good persuasion jumps in and does a good persuasion roll. So then the queen hears this whole story, and she's starting to buy it, and then she turns to her son, and she's like, son, is this true? And the son is like, yes, mother, it's true, haha. And he rolls a fucking 1. And the queen's like, what? And shit's starting to go south. But then the Tabaxi bard, and I just say to the bard, you can tell that things are starting to go really south. Do you do anything? And he's like, I do a performance check. And so as the queen is starting to get pissed off and suspicious, he launches into an epic poem that he's been composing in his head that tells the whole story. And the queen is so impressed by his poem, and that she calms down, and she's like, finally, one of you can communicate. Thank you for telling me all of this. Well, I'm so happy to have my son back. Bring in the gift chest. And she brings in the thing, and she starts distributing the rewards. Una gets 600 gold, with which she hopes to buy her freedom from the vessel that she's an indentured servant on. Daphne doesn't get any gold, but she's released from prison, and the rest of the members of her party find out that she was recently in prison, which she had not been telling them, but the queen just sort of announces it in front of everyone, like, you are free from our prisons. Lord Hans has been bothering her. Like, the first person to talk to her was Lord Hans, and is just like, my queen, I want to be reinstated to my noble family. Like, he just butts in and starts talking about what he wants, and the queen is like, hang on, I'm trying to find out about my son who's been returned by kidnappers. We'll get to the things that you want from me later. So Lord Hans doesn't really do a very good job, so the queen is like, I'll think about this. Let's see how you do at the brunch ball. So the queen because the players got into town very late, the ball is going to be taking place at brunch time for them tomorrow. Yes, the Tabaxi bard saves the day with his poetry performance, and then the queen doles out her gifts. She gives 300 gold to the druid because he was trying to help. 600 to Una, freedom to Daphne, she tells Lord Hans that she's going to think about his request, and she gives. And so the Tabaxi bard tries to speak for each one of them each time. Like the queen is like, Bard, how much did this person help? You know, and the bard didn't roll very well, so the druid only got 300 gold instead of 600. And then the queen's like, and how much did you help, bard? And the bard rolls like a 23 or something. And the queen's like, 600 gold for you. So everybody's rolling in money. And then she tells them all, you're going to go back to your chambers, and the royal tailor is going to meet with you tonight, and he's going to ask you to describe to him your perfect outfit to wear to the brunch ball tomorrow. And then tomorrow morning we'll have the brunch ball for you. And as they're leaving the room, I have Daphne roll insight, and she realizes that the queen knows that they're lying to her, even as she's been like, oh, I'm so happy. And so as they head to their rooms to get ready for the brunch ball, Daphne says to Lord Hans, we've been made. And that is the end of episode 5.
What a cliffhanger.
Indeed.